Before we begin, I do need to throw out some legal disclaimers. I am not a psychologist, psychiatrist, therapist, or counselor, nor does my work replace the need of such medical treatment, as I cannot diagnose, treat, cure any medical conditions. So having said all of that, let me tell you who I am, what I do, and most importantly, how can the information I'm about to share with you tonight impact your life in a profound and significant way? So I'm a life coach specializing in neuroplasticity to help people transform their lives. As overly simplistic as that sounds, it's the ability to transform our internal world that we can actually create an external world that we are passionately engaged in and emotionally fulfilled with. Neuroplasticity is the ability of neural networks in the brain to change through growth and reorganization. What science discovered was that the brain functions like plastic. It's malleable and moldable, and it can, in fact, change. So, for example, a die-hard introvert can become a vibrant extrovert. So how this relates to changing our life is simple. You know the saying, doing the same thing over and over again only yields you the same results? So if we want our world around us to look different, we have to change our behavior, which means we need to feel different, which means we need to then alter our thoughts. My personal story is what actually led me to the research and ultimately my career. I was one of 6 children who experienced a variation of abuse. We were heavily indoctrinated in the dogma of Mennonite faith, of fire and brimstone, and truly all grew up feeling as if children were this burden, yet only good for the sole purpose of making life easier on the family, or rather our parents. My father was a raging alcoholic, abusing pills, and a paranoid schizophrenic. My mother, whom miraculously kept us alive, had lived her entire life in survival mode and in a state of depression. So life felt really desperate and bleak as a child. As I grew up, I was able to adjust and keep up a facade of having it together rather well. In fact, I was pretty ambitious. By the age of 23, I had a thriving business, owned my own home. I was making roughly $60,000 a year, while my friends were either still in college or just getting their student loan bill. I looked like I had a good head on my shoulders, but that really couldn't have been further from the truth. The effects of my childhood played out in my relationships, mostly romantic. And as the years went by, I made a great deal of improvement. So my volatile and abusive relationships leveled up to codependent relationships with unavailable or unstable partners. And at some point in time, I had enough and left yet another marriage. I stopped and really had to acknowledge that there was one common denominator with all of those relationships. It was me. And it was during that time that I met my mentor, who forever changed the course of my life. He introduced me to the missing puzzle piece that I had completely eluded me in the years of my searching for answers. Whether it was getting help from professionals or educating myself through books, I had no idea why I was still running into the same problems, feeling the same way, why happiness and healthy relationships were so bloody evasive, why my external world felt bigger than me, as if I had no control, just waiting for life to happen to me. So fast forward, I dive into this information, I take my transformation seriously, I make behavior changes, and I do the homework and add a better self-care program and reemerge, alas. Except that's when it really hit me. That's when I had a major, massive aha moment. Everyone around me was unfulfilled and miserable too. Marriages were unhappy, and at their worst, people were cheating. Single people were desperate for any relationship or attention they could get. I saw complaining and backbiting, negativity, hopelessness in surplus amongst the masses. I seriously thought that only people with traumatic childhoods had problems. I actually believed that you had to have a lot of trauma to be struggling in relationships and have issues with emotional fulfillment. I looked around and I saw people everywhere struggling. That was news to me. I met with high-powered attorneys making seven figures, living the life others dream of, married to the perfect woman with the perfect child, and in a home that others wouldn't even dare to covet. And he was miserable. Why? Why is that? Or how about the executive living the picket fence life without any emotional relationship with her husband? An empty partnership, as if it were a business transaction. Yet she yearns to have the depth and intimacy without possessing the capability of even opening up to her closest partner. Or what about the liberated woman who, in a vow of personal freedom, proclaims her desire for sexual promiscuity, and yet, in her darkest moments of solitude, feels completely unloved, alone, rejected, and worthless? The bachelor and playboy who can't settle down, can't commit, endlessly searching for fulfillment, yet fulfillment never comes. I could go on and on, as I'm sure you can too, with examples of how it is that people that we were designed for this connection and so commonly rejected by those who could easily attain it and lost to those that chase it. How can people that have the world at their fingertips be utterly miserable and depressed, escaping through whatever means of addiction, food, alcohol, drugs, sex, addiction to attention, needing to be in a relationship, and so on? Believe it or not, there is a multifaceted answer, and in its complexity, it is explained through science, particularly brainwaves. Brainwaves are electrical impulses from masses of neurons communicating with one another. This communication occurs at various energy frequencies. We know that from the age of, birth to the age of 7, the brain functions on theta waves. Theta waves are used in hypnosis due to the enhanced capacity to respond to suggestion. This is the very reason why those years are considered programming years. Consequently, children are being hypnotized or programmed by their environment throughout these impressionable years. So now let's dive into psychology. Dr. Jeffrey Young, an American psychologist specializing in cognitive therapy, noticed that there were specific markers or similarities between his non-responsive patients. And before I go any deeper into his work, I want to finish illustrating this big picture. What Dr. Young concluded was that in early childhood, most people have developed belief systems about themselves, others, and life itself that were unhealthy. Now, these belief systems are predominantly buried in the subconscious, and evidence shows that the subconscious mind is in control during the day between 90 and 95%. So think about that, 90 to 95%. How scary is that? So while you're going about your day, driving, doing a job you can do in your sleep, changing diapers, breathing, eating, walking, in the back of your mind, there's a recording saying, no one understands me. I can't rely on anyone for support. Men cheat. You can't trust women. I'm not good enough. No one would love me if they saw the real me, and so on. All day long, these thoughts are cyclically reverberating destructive beliefs, creating destructive emotions that trigger a chemical release in your body. In neuroscience, there's a saying, neurons that fire together, wire together. As a repetition of thoughts recreate the same emotion, the brain begins to be hardwired or programmed with that belief system every time that emotion is stimulated. But you don't even have to repeatedly experience the event physically. You see, the brain does not know the difference between an actual experience versus thinking of an event, past, present, or future. So as the neurons are firing off electrically in a succinct pattern, creating the emotion has its own energetic frequency. Okay, so now just bear with me. I know this is a lot of information. We're almost done, and I promise I'm going to put all of this together for you so it's digestible. There is one last facet of science that adds an entirely new dimension and perspective, and my personal favorite, quantum physics. So our universe is made of energy, a field of invisible moving forces that impact our physical world. Einstein said it best: energy imprints upon matter. So we live in a world made of energy with brain waves and emotions that send energetic frequencies that can be measured outside of the body, just like an EKG measures the frequencies of a heart. Do you remember that saying, birds of a feather flock together, or you're the sum of your 5 closest friends? Well, quantum physics supports that too. For example, if you play a G chord on a guitar and a nearby guitar, this G chord will actually begin to vibrate. If you hold down that original guitar's chord and stop it, but then release it, the frequency from the second guitar will bounce back to the original guitar and its G chord will begin playing again. So what does that specifically mean? Well, allow me to string the pieces together. As children, during our impressionable years, we are under a state of hypnosis, gathering all suggestions as facts pertaining to us, as if it's true to us. And in addition, repeated emotions that we experience in our daily life or stressful events get hardwired into our subconscious over time as belief systems. Now, both of these phenomena design the architecture in the brain to function in a very specific way. In other words, our lens in which we view and experience life is now created. Adding in the quantum field, other people's belief systems and emotions are all vibrating within the same field that we're surrounded in. And as a child, under the hypnotic theta waves, those now become suggestions and internalized as our own as well. So this is why people can struggle with behaviors and beliefs or addictions that parents had without ever even observing the parent battle them. And moving into adulthood then, our brain has been programmed to re-trigger our belief systems so that to meet its dependency of the chemicals of the emotional release because it's addicted. So it's true. Some of us are chemically addicted to feeling abandoned, misunderstood, unloved. These emotional frequencies are sent out into our energetic field, and along comes a person or an event with a perfect energetic match. Yes, more misery. And with each passing experience, the subconscious beliefs are reinforced and the biochemical dependency for that emotion increases. And you send out more frequencies over and over to match your new lower state. So this is why people can't remember the last time they were really happy. Another brilliant illustration is the story of the infamous rebound, right? We've all had them. You just broke up with someone and you're completely heartbroken. Along comes Mr. or Mrs. Wrong, and they're perfect. You're both miserable, lonely victims. I mean, people. But what happens? Hopefully you begin to get your mojo back and all of a sudden, things don't feel so perfect anymore. You break up and alas, you and your friends either laugh or cringe at the infamous tale of the rebound for years to come. I've worked with adults who have continuously dealt with depressive feelings after working with me, I should say, They realize that growing up, one of their parents unknowingly struggled with depression, or adults low self-esteem despite a very loving upbringing, but someone in the family felt not worthy or not good enough. And often this energy was also reinforced through the child's distorted lens of what the reality was, hence the creation of negative belief systems. So ideally, as we age, we do learn from our past and develop the conscious ability to choose better, at least on the surface. But as long as these programs are still running in the back of our mind, there's still that propensity to attract people into situations that are, similar belief systems as ours. For example, the young girl that suffered feeling rejected and unloved, abandoned and neglected, marries a drug and sex addict that commits armed robbery and is sent to prison, evoking all of these childhood beliefs and emotions that she grew up with. Now, she can grow up and be much more wise and discerning, yet not knowing that these subconscious belief patterns are very much still alive and thriving, marries a successful CEO who is a high-functioning closet alcoholic and a promiscuous narcissist. On the surface and overall, it appears like she's leveled up. However, here she is years later in a relationship where she still feels rejected, unloved, abandoned, and neglected. She's become better at concealing her dysfunctional beliefs to both herself and to the world around. Yet her internal world is still in a hopeless loop. So by now, you're probably wondering, what are these subconscious belief systems? I'm glad you asked. We're about to go over them. So there's actually 18 identified belief systems, also known as life traps, that plague the masses. These themes are divided into 3 categories: a child's basic need for food, water, warmth, rest, security, and safety; the psychological needs as it pertains to belongingness, love, and esteem needs. This involves intimate relationships, friends, prestige, and feelings of accomplishment. Then finally, self-actualization, achieving one's full potential, including creative activities. For the sake of brevity, we're going to discuss the 5 most crucial as it relates to the fundamentals of daily life. There's 4 types of childhood experiences that foster these life traps. The first 2 and most obvious is when a child doesn't get enough love, understanding, support, guidance, stability, or nurturance within the family dynamic. Also, if a child is mistreated, victimized, or traumatized. The third experience may actually surprise you, but when you take a step back, I think you'll realize that there are perfect examples of this everywhere in society. When a child receives too much of a good thing. If parents are too protective or too involved and they spoil the child and don't set appropriate boundaries, rules, or have any disciplinary actions. As a mother myself, I'm continuously shocked by the bragging of parents for being helicopter moms and dads, going over the top for their kids, not setting expectations for the child's behavior towards themselves or others, as well as negating to give their child any feedback of poor behavior, let alone any consequences. And lastly, the child identifies with or internalizes certain behaviors, emotions, or attitudes of a particular parent through a completely selective subconscious process. Not necessarily everything, but various elements of the parent. So learning the scope of childhood environments that can manifest destructive belief systems, you can easily see how someone with a very privileged and loving childhood can deal with similar patterns as someone growing up in a much more dysfunctional environment. It's also important to understand that despite even the best of intentions of a parent, when a child's needs are not met, regardless of the why, the child is still negatively impacted. We'll begin this issue of abandonment and instability. This is the perception of instability or unreliability of those available for support and connection. It's the sense that significant others will not be able to continue to provide emotional support, connection, strength, or protection on a practical level due to their instability or unpredictable nature, unreliability, or even erratically present due to illness, addiction, or because they fear the person will leave in favor for someone else. Parents or other important caretakers of the home may have left, a divorce, having been given up for adoption, or placed in foster care are common childhood associations as well. Having had parents that were emotionally unstable or addicted to drugs and alcohol, unable to be present and reliable, are also commonly seen. Just as common are children that grow up with a parent traveling often for work or working long hours. While the parent most likely did so out of love to support their family, the results are still similar in the child's psyche. So from the content of Dr. Young and Dr. Colosso's book, Reinventing Your Life, listen to the following sentences and see if any of these resonate with you. I worry that people I love will die or that they will leave me. I cling to people because I'm afraid they will leave me. I do not have a stable base of support. I keep falling in love with people who cannot be there for me in a committed way, whether they refuse to or are incapable for various reasons. People have always come and gone in my life. I get depressed when someone I love pulls away. I get so obsessed with the idea that my lover will leave me that I drive them away. The people closest to me are unpredictable. They come and go in my life, being there 1 minute and gone the next. I need other people too much. In the end, I will be alone. Now, how these themes play out for everyone differs, but if several of these statements sound very true to you, you may easily see this play out in your life in the following ways. You may avoid intimate relationships, even with appropriate partners, because you're afraid of losing the person or getting too close and being hurt. You may worry excessively about the possibility that your partner will die or otherwise be lost. You overreact to minor things your partner says or does and interpret them as signs that he or she wants to leave you. You are excessively jealous or possessive. You may cling to your partner. Your whole life becomes obsessed with keeping him or her. You may not be able to stand to be away from your partner for very long. Or you can never fully convince yourself that your partner really will stay with you. You may get angry and accuse your partner of not being loyal or faithful. You may detach, leave, or withdraw to punish your partner for leaving you alone. I've seen this play out in my clients' lives where they remain in a relationship when their partner abandons them through cheating, and rather than the natural desire to end a relationship, they become desperate to repair and keep the relationship. But the promiscuous partner has the same issue, only their actions create their own abandonment. Eventually, people leave them when mistreated. So to perpetuate their own feelings of abandonment, they abandon others out of fear of being abandoned. Or people will begin relationships with someone that cannot commit in the long run. Maybe they're already in a relationship where they live at a distance, work or travel a lot. Or maybe they're just emotionally unstable for whatever reason, like drugs or mental illness. They're just unavailable to be there for you consistently. And you might date someone who insists on freedom to come and go, never settle down, or wants to be, wants to have an option, have multiple partners. They may be ambivalent about you. They may want you, but then they hold back emotionally. Or 1 minute acts deeply in love and the next as if you don't even exist. Also seen is the obsessive nature of a partner wanting to control the other person and keep tabs on their every move, needing check-ins throughout the day, tracking on their phones, or needing constant reassurance. Now, the second life trap is mistrust and abuse, where one develops an expectation that others will hurt, abuse, humiliate, cheat, lie, manipulate, or take advantage of you. It's a perception that harm is intentional or the result of unjustified or extreme negligence, such as the feeling that you always get when you feel like you're being cheated in relation to others. Examples would be like, you always get the short end of the stick, or nice guys finish last, all guys just want sex, women just use you, nothing lasts forever, etc. Let's see if you can relate to some of these statements. I expect people to use or hurt me. Throughout my life, people close to me have abused me. It's only a matter of time before the people I love will betray me. I have to protect myself and stay on guard. If I'm not careful, people will take advantage of me. I set up tests for people to see if they are really on my side. I hurt people before they hurt me. I'm afraid to let people get close to me because I expect them to hurt me. I'm angry about what people have done to me. Now, this destructive pattern completely blocks off the ability to feel safe, to emotionally connect. Now, I see clients who attract users and abusers, or in safe relationships, what they'll do is they'll actually sabotaging it by creating unwanted conflict and chaos because they can't seem to trust their partner. I've also observed those who use others for superficial relationships, completely unable to feel safe enough to be vulnerable, to have an intimate relationship with someone. They just perpetually see each new partner as the last, consequently denying themselves of what they psychologically need the most, genuine, intimate connection. So next, we're going to take a look at emotional deprivation. Now, this is the expectation that one's desire for a normal degree of emotional support will not be adequately met by others. There are three major forms of deprivation. The first is deprivation of nurturance, which is the absence of attention, affection, warmth, or compassion. Deprivation of empathy is the absence of understanding, listening, self-disclosure, or a mutual sharing of feelings from others. And lastly is deprivation of protection, the absence of strength, direction, or guidance from others. The childhood environment is often very similar to that of abandonment. Regardless of the cause, children grow up not receiving the emotional support and connection they needed from one or both parents or caregiver. So let's see how many of these statements sound familiar to you. I need more love than I get. No one really understands me. I'm often attracted to cold partners who can't meet my needs. I feel disconnected, even from the people who are closest to me or desire a relationship to be with me. I have a hard time believing that there's a special person that's really there for me, that cares for me, and really is vested in what happens to me. No one there is around to give me warmth, holding, and affection. I do not have someone who really listens and is tuned into my true needs and feelings. It's hard for me to let people love me. I'm lonely all the time. Now, emotional deprivation is the most frequent program I observe in people. It feels as if something is missing. It's a feeling of emptiness, you guys. Now, when you think about this, you see this everywhere. Couples who've been married for years and years that are just coexisting, living completely separate lives are impacted by this as much as the single teenager desperate for someone to love her. Similar to that of abandonment, we connect with others who refuse to or are incapable of meeting our emotional needs. Partners are cold and aloof, sporadically available. They may be uncomfortable touching or kissing, and they do all the talking with little interest in listening to you. You're much more interested in getting close than they are to you, and the more or the less available they are, the more obsessed you become. You give more than you get. Now, however, often it's our own undermining behaviors that play out in this. You may not tell your partner what you need, then you feel disappointed when your needs aren't met. You don't tell them how you feel, yet you feel disappointed when you are not understood. You feel deprived, but you say nothing and harbor resentment. You become angry, demanding, or accuse your partner of not caring enough, or you become distant and unreachable. Emotional deprivation is the most common reason relationships end and there's cheating. People need to feel connection within their partners. Pursuing a relationship with someone who is incapable of emotional giving or receiving will either result in a failed relationship or complete misery within the relationship. Remember, all of these things exist in platonic relationships as well. Now let's take a look at the defectiveness and shame life trap. This is the feeling that one is bad, unwarranted, inferior, or invalid in important respects. That one would be unlovable to significant others if exposed. One may possess a hypersensitivity to criticism, rejection, and blame. Self-consciousness, comparisons, and insecurities around others can be involved. A sense of shame regarding one's perceived flaws, either private or publicly recognized, which, if any of these sentences have you ever entertained in your thoughts and do you hear yourself saying? No man or woman could love me if he or she really knew me. I am inherently flawed and defective. I'm unworthy of love. I have secrets that I do not want to share, even with people closest to me. It was my fault that my parents could not love me. I hide the real me. The real me is unacceptable. The self I show is false. I'm often drawn to people, parents, friends, and lovers who are critical and reject me. I'm often critical in rejecting myself, especially of people who seem to love me. I devalue my positive qualities. I live with a great deal of shame about myself. One of my greatest fears is that my faults will be exposed. Now, origins of this stem from a family member being extremely critical, demeaning, or punitive towards the child. The child was made to feel like a disappointment, was rejected or unloved by one or both parents, possibly sexually, physically, or emotionally abused by a family member. The child may have been blamed for things that went wrong. A parent or caregiver may have repeatedly told the child that they were bad, worthless, or good for nothing. They were repeatedly compared in unfavorable ways with their brothers or sisters, or their siblings were preferred over them. Maybe one parent left home and the child blamed themselves. Now, we can actually experience this life trap in the following ways. You may end up becoming very critical of your partner, and once you feel accepted and your romantic feelings disappear, then act in a demeaning or critical manner towards them. You hide your true self, so no one really gets to know you, including your partner. You're jealous and possessive of your partner. You constantly compare yourself unfavorably with other people and feel envious and inadequate. You continuously need or demand reassurance that your partner still values you. You may put yourself down around people. You allow others to criticize you, put you down, or mistreat you. You have difficulty accepting valid criticism. You become very defensive or hostile. You're extremely critical of your children. You feel like an imposter when you're successful. You feel extremely anxious that you cannot maintain your success. Or you become despondent or deeply depressed over career setbacks or rejections in relationships. You feel excessively nervous when speaking in public. Now, unfortunately, dating someone with this life trap can be extremely exhausting and depleting. The other partner feels picked apart about everything they do and end up feeling hopeless in ever being able to appease or fulfill the other person. And on the other end, you allow yourself to be subject to mistreatment or even abuse. One of my clients struggled greatly with this despite appearing to have it all. He had a severe learning disorder growing up, which caused him to feel broken. Meanwhile, his father had a lifetime of being the it guy with the it factor, right? We all know them, just magically having everything. And all this made my client feel even more defective. He was comparing himself to his dad. And as an adult, even though being very successful, being very attractive, he found that he sought after young, beautiful women or the need to have the attention of multiple women to validate his worth. An endless stream of attention as to not question his own feelings of lack or inferiority. Now, the last subconscious belief system we're going to discuss is social isolation and alienation. This produces the feeling that one is isolated from the rest of the world, is different from other people, or doesn't feel a sense of belonging in a group or community. This originates in adolescence, where the child felt inferior to other children because some observable quality. The child's family may have been different from neighbors or people around due to race, religion, social status, education level, material possessions. Maybe there was something about the child that they were picked on at school. Or perhaps there was a language barrier with the family, or someone in the family had mental illness or addiction. They may have frequently moved, and the child was passive or did what was expected without ever developing a strong interest or preference in their own stuff. You may have experienced a number of these things: feeling very self-conscious and social isolation, feeling dull or boring at parties, never feeling like you have anything to say, or, think that the people I want as friends are above me in some way. I'd rather avoid than attend most social gatherings. I feel unattractive. I'm too fat, too thin, tall, short, ugly. I feel fundamentally different than other people. I don't belong anywhere. I'm a loner. I always feel like an outsider in groups. My family was different from the families around us. Or I feel disconnected from my community at large. Something often heard is people feeling like the black sheep of the family, never feeling as if they fit in or were accepted. A client who struggled to see how this impacted her noticed that while it didn't impact her one-on-one relationships, it played a significant role in her social life without ever realizing why she preferred intimate settings or why she avoided large groups. Even when asked by a friend to join a local PTA, she declined because she felt as if no one would like her, when that was obviously not the case. Preferring to keep her circle of friends very small, despite the continuous invitations from other people that wanted to get to know her. So by now, it's obvious to comprehend just exactly how destructive and devastating these belief systems are to all of us, regardless of the fact as to whether or not it's our direct action or if we were on the receiving end of someone else's actions. Participating in these unhealthy patterns holds us hostage and keeps us from attaining the ultimate stability, the confidence, and the fulfillment we want out of life. Now, especially when it comes to relationships where we want them to be intimate and reciprocal and safe. Dr. Young so eloquently stated, life traps actively organize our experience. They operate in overt and subtle ways to influence how we feel, think, and act. Now, speaking of action, it goes without saying that our behavior is oftentimes a self-defeating coping strategy. The last thing I want to cover are the 3 different coping mechanisms we utilize to cope with our life traps. The underlying subconscious beliefs. And this explains why children growing up in the same environment can appear to be so different based on which strategies they employ. The first is surrender. This is when we give into the belief system, when we think, feel, and act as if it's true. The most common situation is where you see someone repeating the same self-destructive pattern over and over again. For example, the nice girl continuously dating another bad boy, or that friend who almost systematically makes the same mistake over and over and over again. The second approach is to escape. This is where addictions fall in, or a simple avoidance strategy. Addiction and avoidance work together like excessive working hours to avoid coming home. Often people avoid discussing issues in relationships or situations to pretend as if the problem doesn't exist. We escape to avoid thinking about our life trap. People keep themselves entertained or preoccupied in order to not have to think, feel, or process. Many people become so fearful of ever being hurt again that they avoid emotional intimacy altogether, even at the cost of their own emotional needs. Lastly, we have counterattacking. Now, counterattackers are very critical of others while rarely acknowledging any faults in themselves. By counterattacking, people can convince themselves that the opposite is true, clinging to a persona that they are special or superior, perfect, or infallible. They appear to be healthy and are often successful, but underneath the mask, they are usually very fragile. The biggest drawback to this coping style is that it isolates us. When being right or perfect is prized over who we hurt in the process, we eventually lose people. Now, the lack of vulnerability also gets in the way of real intimacy as they lose the ability to trust and connect at a deeper level. We typically use a variation of coping mechanisms with one or two being dominant. Understanding and identifying the layers and principles of what is needed to change your mind is the secret sauce to living the life you desire. My objective in this webinar was to equip you with the same information that I educate my clients with. Transforming your life, which includes experiences, your relationships, and how you show up for yourself, is completely possible. By altering our personality, which means changing our thoughts and belief systems, which dictates the emotions we feel, which ultimately impacts our behavior, we can then change our reality. Our brains emit frequencies through an energetic field that is attracting others with similar frequencies and inherently similar belief systems. Our closest relationships truly are the sum of our numerical frequency or vibration. Our vibe not only attracts our tribe, it brings to fruition the subconscious programs in our brain that are designed to succeed. After all, what you believe is true. Now, if you're interested in diving in deeper to understand what behaviors you need to change, red flags to look for in others, if you want to identify other life traps that could be keeping you in a perpetual loop of dissatisfaction or pain, if you just want to learn how my clients and I utilize energy psychology, emotional freedom tapping to rewire your subconscious programs, then sign up for my 12-week course, From Scars to Beauty Marks. It truly is the ultimate life hack and emotional first aid kit to heal the psyche so you can reinvent a new reality. When you sign up this week, you'll receive over $500 off when you use the code CHANGE. You'll be invited to our private online community where support and motivation are at your fingertips. You'll get access to a weekly group coaching call throughout the duration of the course and receive a one-on-one 30-minute call with myself where you can receive a private Q&A session. And this bonus package is only being offered for those of you watching this webinar. The total investment is $1,998 and the link is in the chat. I want to give my sincerest and deepest gratitude for your choice to spend the last 45 minutes with me. If you have any questions or want to inquire about working with me on a one-on-one basis, please email me. Again, that email address is info@helenaklassen.com. Again, thank you and have a fantastic night.